Morning, everyone. Boker Tov. So we're continuing the halachot of riding on a boat on Shabbat, over Shabbat. So for this next halacha, we mentioned a little bit about it in brief, but we'll give some context to it. So on Shabbat, there's a thing called isur of tchum, meaning we know that there's a thing of a eruv, and you can't carry unless there's an eruv on Shabbat. But there's another halacha of a tchum, that you're not allowed to walk outside of the city 2,000 amot, about a kilometer outside of the city. Now, where's the end of the city? Where there's no more houses and there's no more, even if a person made a temporary type of house, that would even count. So, we live in a big city, and really you can walk for hours and hours, and there's still houses, there's still things going on. But if you get to the edge of a city, and there's now, a kilometer of nothing happening, that's the end of the city, 2,000 amot, you can't walk there. Okay, so you can't walk out of the city 2,000 amot on Shabbat. Now, this is applicable to going on a boat as well. So what happens is as follows. Let's say you go on a boat, and so now like this, you have land, and then you go onto the water. Now, if the bottom of the boat to the floor is less than 10 tefachim, which is probably rare, for sure not going to happen on a cruise ship, but maybe in a small boat. So 10 tefachim is about 1 meter. So if then that's considered like you're still on land in a certain way. So if you go out and you're on land, and so it's considered on land, so like you left the city by a kilometer, by 2,000 amot, that's not allowed. So now the cases that we're talking about always is that you're leaving Erev Shabbat, you're not leaving on Shabbat, you're leaving Erev Shabbat, you're leaving 3 days before Shabbat, etc. So what happens is as follows. If, let's say, you would know that at some point on your trip, because now you're now, the case is, Halachot Shabbat, is that you're in the boat on Shabbat. You already started before Shabbat, but now you're in the boat on Shabbat. We said, okay, you could carry on if you went on before 3 days, from Wednesday or earlier, or from Friday if it was the Tzorach Mitzvah. But if at some point in your trip, now it's on Shabbat, and you are in less than a meter of water to the ground, from the boat, the bottom of the boat to the ground, less than a meter, and you're traveling that distance for a kilometer, for 2,000 amot, then in a certain way you were on land, in a certain way, and you've traveled that much out inland on Shabbat for that amount, that's an isur of tchumim, and that's a surah on Shabbat. So you can't go onto that type of ferry ride or boat ride. So again, not going to happen in cruise ships. It'll get stuck in that. It's not going to happen. Maybe in small boats, you get to that small amount. The boat guys would know that answer more. But this is applicable maybe for the next 2 cases. The next case is, so learning from here is, what about if I go on a train before Shabbat, and I'm going to go now, I'm going to stay on the same train all the way, it's going to go until after Shabbat. You have a whole, West Coast, you're going for days, and you're not going to get off, I'm going to go on the whole time. So that's asur, because you're for sure going to go out of the city, and you are less than you're not floating, you're still on the ground, and that's for sure asur. Now what about an airplane? What if I go on an airplane before Shabbat, and I'm going to land after Shabbat? You have a whole long flight, Australia to who knows where, and you're flying 26 hours, 28 hours, and with the time zones, time differences, you're leaving before Shabbat, you're getting there after Shabbat. So that, there is room for leniency if you're in need. Now, there's marit ayin, right? But if you're in need, that's more leniency because you're in the air. There's no tchumin. If you're above 10 tefachim from the ground, there's no tchumin. There's no issue with leaving outside of the city if you're in the air. So it's an interesting thing where if you're on the ground, right? So a train type of thing or a boat in this type of case, it's not going to be allowed. In an airplane, now certainly if you land on Shabbat or you can't go on the airplane on Shabbat, you can't go on the train on Shabbat, or you can't. So that's, but you're saying, we're talking about before Shabbat till after Shabbat, train, no. It's probably impossible to be for 24 hours on a train where you're always in a city at all times without leaving a city, probably impossible. Airplane, if need be, difficult situation, then there is room for leniency. Last point is, let's say the plane accidentally lands on Shabbat. Let's say you're supposed to go all the way, or there's a delay, you landed on Shabbat. So he brings down here, Rav David Yosef, the chief rabbi of Israel, so you're allowed to you can't stay on the plane, you have to get off. So you're getting off, and you have to continue going. They're not going to let you stuck there without customs. You're allowed. The guy's probably a goy. He's doing it for his own. He's not doing it to benefit the Jew. You're allowed to give him your passport. But then you get into the issue of tchumin. Now, if you're in an airport that's in a city and you're right by the city, right, then you could keep on walking and walk to wherever if you're in the city. But a lot of times it's a little bit outside the city, and if again there's an issue of a tchum, then you can't leave the airport on Shabbat. It's just a side halacha for here. Yeah.
If we have a law which is 8 days, for example, like 100 years ago that was in place, and from Morocco you have to come here. It's more than 8 days. What to do?
That's what we're saying. That if we started before Shabbat, 3 days before Shabbat, or if you start Wednesday or earlier, even for a vacation, it's fine because you're still on the thing on Shabbat. If you want to go on a Friday, it has to be for Letzorach Mitzvah. It has to be Letzorach Mitzvah. And provided, of course, that on Shabbat, provided we said that everybody is going, everybody meaning the people working the boat are going, provided that on Shabbat you're not doing any melacha, but then you could keep on going with it. Okay, and we'll talk, we didn't get to yet, if you get to an island, can I get off, can I get on? We're going to talk about that. Okay, that's that for today. Mincha tonight at 6:30. Have a good day, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom.